In what is likely to be the largest sewage spill in American history, roughly 300 million gallons of raw, untreated sewage was dumped into the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. This came as a result of a 60-year-old pipe collapsing along the Clara Barton Parkway. Quote, an enormous sewage spill that sent hundreds of millions of gallons of raw human waste into the Potomac River is threatening the health of the river and the safety of those who use it. In what appears to be the largest discharge of its kind in the nation's history, untreated sewage began gushing into the Potomac on January 19th when a section of a sewer line collapsed near the Clara Barton Parkway in Montgomery County, Maryland, about 5 miles upstream of Washington. And so this pipe, which for reference is huge, by the way, it's a 72-inch diameter pipe, so it's 6 feet going across, and through it passes something like 60 million gallons of raw sewage per day. The sewage, it comes from as far away as Dulles International Airport in Virginia, and it goes to the Blue Plains treatment plant in Washington, D.C., where it gets treated, cleaned, and then eventually released into the river. However, in late January, when that pipe collapsed, the 60 million gallons of daily raw sewage had nowhere else to go. This meant that it was just piling up for about 1 full week. Quote, the sewage flooded into the river unencumbered for about a week until DC Water, the utility that owns and operates the sewer line, was able to divert it to a section of pipe downstream that runs to a water treatment facility. However, it is worth noting that even after this diversion to another pipe, there have been intermittent sewage spills happening at the site of the collapse as recently as just last week. In fact, if you go over to dcwater.com, where you can find daily updates on the repair process, it says that as workers are racing to fix the pipe, spills continue to occasionally occur. Quote, pumping capacity remains a challenge due to ongoing maintenance and operational issues. An overflow occurred late Monday night when 2 pumps, clogged with non-disposable wipes, were taken out of service for cleaning and maintenance. During a period of high flow, the volume of wastewater temporarily exceeded pumping capacity, resulting in the overflow, which is honestly a good reminder to all of us to never flush those non-disposable wipes down the toilet. You think that it's more convenient and maybe you're saving a few seconds, but actually you might be unknowingly causing sewage to literally spill out onto the surface of the earth. Regardless, those recent leaks were minor leaks. The bulk of the problem happened in that first 1 week before the sewage was diverted to another pipe. During that 1 week, roughly 300 million gallons of raw human sewage flowed into the river, which during that time period, if you do the math, represented something like 2% of the entire river's flow. Quote, DC Water, a local water utility, said that roughly 194 million gallons overflowed from the collapse site in the first 5 days after the incident, with about 49 million gallons overflowing in the time since. The utility noted that the estimated peak discharge of wastewater, roughly 40 million gallons per day, accounts for about 2% of the Potomac's total flow during the period. Now, I will just quickly mention, for your reference, as a total aside, that there are different estimates floating around out there. Some groups say that it's 250 million gallons of waste that was released. Some other groups say that it's over 300 million gallons. To me, it seems a bit like splitting hairs. I mean, at those volumes, what's the actual difference from a human perspective if it's 250 million versus 300 million gallons of raw human sewage? It is what it is. I will just mention to you that there are different estimates depending on who you ask. I'll also mention that you should take a quick moment to smash those like and subscribe buttons so that you can get updates every time we publish them. And also, the YouTube algorithm can pick up this episode and share it with more people. Thank you so much. All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment, I'd like to introduce our sponsor and my own personal gold dealer, American Hartford Gold. Now, as soon as the latest round of tariffs hit, almost immediately, the stock market hit some serious waves, we could say. It became super turbulent, very volatile, and of course, these conditions don't just affect Wall Street. They affect all of us with our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I want to introduce a company that I trust and I use myself to help secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move their assets into something tangible, something you can actually hold, physical gold and physical silver. 2 precious metals that help me sleep better at night, knowing that I have a hedge against all those brilliant decisions being made over in Washington. Now, they have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, they have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your doorstep, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive buy one, get one deal for my viewers. When you call them and mention my name, Roman, for every 1 ounce of gold that you purchase, you can get 1 ounce of free silver. And so take advantage of this special offer. Either call 866-242-2352 or simply text Roman to 65532. That's again, 866-242-2352 or text Roman to 65532. I'll also throw their information. It'll be down in the description box below. Regardless of that though, the problems that present themselves to the people who actually live by the river are severalfold. Besides, I guess just the disgusting thought of it and the accompanying smell, there is the elevated presence of things like E. coli, MRSA, as well as the bacteria that causes staph infections. And on the topic of E. coli specifically, quote, researchers from the University of Maryland, in partnership with the Potomac Riverkeeper Network, found that water samples from where sewage entered the Potomac were more than 10,000 times above EPA standards on January 21st and more than 2,500 times above EPA standards on January 28th. On January 28th, water from a site 10 miles downstream from the overflow tested 1.5 times above the E. coli concentration standard. And by the way, muddying the waters a little bit, DC Water, which is that local utility, they made a huge mistake when initially reporting the E. coli levels near the drainage pipe. They said on February 6th that the levels of E. coli were 2,420 parts per 100 milliliters. But then later they offered a correction saying that due to human error, those numbers were off by a factor of 100. The real number on that date was 242,000 parts per 100 milliliters, meaning there was 100 times more E. coli than they reported for that particular day. In their correction, they stated that, quote, we regret this mistake and have implemented additional quality control measures to ensure the accuracy of the data reported. Now, since then, according at least to the local DC officials, subsequent tests found that the presence of E. coli has declined significantly in the river, to the point now where DC Water, they claim that, quote, E. coli concentrations at all downstream sampling locations were within the EPA's acceptable range for recreational activities. Which is a bit funny because if that's true, if the level of E. coli is within the EPA's accepted range of recreational activities, which I guess would include swimming, then why are both the DC Department of Energy and Environment, as well as the Virginia Department of Health, telling people right now to avoid any contact with the river? According to them, those two agencies, people should not be engaging in anything, in fishing, in tubing, in whitewater canoeing, in kayaking, and they're also telling people to avoid letting their pets make contact with the river. It could just be out of an abundance of caution, but my point is that mixed messages are getting sent out to the public. However, perhaps the silver lining to all this is that according to those two agencies, the local DC drinking water has not actually been negatively affected, since they say that the drinking water goes through a separate system, and that system is located upstream from where the spill actually occurred. Quote, DC Water has stated that drinking water is not affected by the incident. The nearest Virginia location using the Potomac River as a primary source of water is the city of Fairfax, with an intake located several miles upstream of where the sewage spill entered the river. So that's good if it's true. However, regarding the river itself downstream, even though the most recent sample test showed that the bacteria levels are beginning to stabilize and return to normal, you do have to factor in the freezing temperatures that currently exist. When spring comes in a month or two, the bacteria that's frozen now might once again become a problem. Here was what, in fact, the president of the Potomac Riverkeeper Network told The Hill in an interview just a few days ago. Quote, as spring approaches and temperatures get warmer, frozen bacteria that was previously dormant in the Potomac will unfreeze and release into the river. That makes continual monitoring of E. coli levels paramount. As we're getting all this melting, we're getting new releases from bacteria that already came from the pipes but were frozen in the river. And we have no idea how long that could be going on, and that's part of the reason we're going to need consistent monitoring, analyses, and reporting on this to make sure as it gets warmer, people can stay safe. Meaning that if you have any plans in the Potomac River this upcoming spring, well, do keep an eye out for any updates coming out from the local water agencies. And then also, secondly, a big shout out to our new coffee sponsor. Hunter's Blend Coffee is a great brand. It's run by American patriots. They cut out the middleman and ship the coffee directly to your doorstep, saving you a lot of money in the process. And the coffee is great. It's super fresh. I myself drink it almost every morning. It's roasted and packaged right here in the US by people who actually share your values. And so check them out. The link will be down there in the description box below. Now, the next part is, I don't almost want to get into it, but I guess it is a part of the story, which is the political angle. And the best way to describe it is that every single party involved is just pointing the finger at every other party that's involved. For his part, President Trump released a statement on Truth Social basically castigating and putting the blame on the local Democrat leadership. Here was the initial post that he made on Monday, February 16th. Quote, "There is a massive ecological disaster unfolding in the Potomac River as a result of the gross mismanagement of local Democrat leaders, particularly Governor Wes Moore of Maryland. A sewer line breach in Maryland has caused millions of gallons of raw sewage to be dumped directly into the Potomac River, a result of incompetent local and state management of essential waste management systems." Meaning that, at least according to President Trump, the Democrat governor of Maryland, as well as the local utilities, they're at fault for the initial spill and then the subsequent week-long drainage. However, as a response to that, you had Governor Wes Moore of Maryland fire back at President Trump by saying that, no, you're actually at fault. Here was what Governor Moore said in a statement by a spokesperson. Quote, "The president has his facts wrong again. Since the last century, the federal government has been responsible for the Potomac Interceptor, which is the origin of the sewage leak. For the last 4 weeks, the Trump administration has failed to act, shirking its responsibility and putting people's health at risk." Meaning that even though the spill happened in the borders of Maryland, it was actually the federal government responsible for maintaining that pipe. And this is where things get a little bit muddy, because it is the EPA which regulates state waterways and wetlands. However, it's DC Water, which is an independent public authority in Washington, D.C., which is responsible for pipe repairs, cleanup, and they're the ones who give both operational updates to both the state and local governments. And just as President Trump alluded to in that statement of his on Truth Social, it is true that there has been a lot more DEI-related policies being pushed by DC Water. Under the Biden administration, they even set up something that was akin to an affirmative action contracting policy, where they have been actively prioritizing minority-owned businesses in the bidding process, and they've even been giving those minority-owned businesses leeway if those contractors fall short of expectations. Quote, "Under the new CEO, DC Water also pursued fair share objectives to boost participation from disadvantaged, minority, and women-owned business enterprises. To reinforce those goals, DC Water created the Business Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Council and established bidding preferences for disadvantaged and women-owned contractors on projects over $1 million. Under its 2020 amended business development plan, such contractors cannot be penalized for falling short of project goals if they demonstrate good faith effort." Along that same line, here is a short clip from a Zoom meeting with the DC Water CEO, wherein he discusses the priorities when hiring new executives.
You know, when I arrived at DC Water, this was an organization that looked very similar to our industry. It was predominantly, white male at the top, but this is a utility that's, more than 70% people of color work at this utility. And I really believe, and I still believe, and it has been fantastic. The outcomes have been fantastic, but the people at the top, the executives, the chiefs in that C-suite, they should look like the employees that they serve and that they work with. And the same thing with the community. And so my executive team, looks exactly like the community. It looks like the employees, the staff, be it people of color, women, men. And it's just a fantastic team that has come together to do a lot of great things here at DC Water and in the community for the customers.
But to offer a counterpoint, to be fair, there is no clear evidence that these DEI policies had anything to do with either the spill or the cleanup effort. And actually, the CEO of DC Water, he's been pretty vocal about working alongside the Trump administration's EPA to both fix the immediate problem with the spill, but then also to fix and update the aging infrastructure so that more spills don't happen later. So basically, that's where we're at. In a political sense, it's just a game of whodunit at this point, with everybody pointing fingers at everybody else. However, I will say, regardless of the rhetoric, thankfully, the cleanup effort is really underway. On February 16th, you had President Trump announce that FEMA had been mobilized to assist with the cleanup. 2 days later, on February 18th, the mayor of Washington, D.C. declared a state of emergency and officially asked President Trump for support. And then on Saturday, February 21st, Trump approved the emergency declaration, and he assigned a high-level official within the EPA to begin overseeing the official cleanup efforts. And the EPA, for their part, they said that, for one, DC Water should be finished fixing the broken pipe by mid-March. And secondly, they say that they will ensure that the entire cleanup is completed by July 4th, which happens to be America's 250th anniversary, which will have a big celebration in the nation's capital. And so that's where we're at. If you'd like to read more about anything related to the spill and the subsequent ecological disaster, I will throw the links to all my research notes. You'll be able to find them down in the description box below. And also, if you happen to know anything that I failed to mention in this episode, let me know. Specifically about those DEI initiatives by DC Water. I mean, you can easily imagine those many years of DEI initiatives where they're allowing minority-owned businesses and women-led businesses to have priority when bidding on the contracts. And if they don't meet the goals, it's okay, just as long as they showed the necessary effort. You can imagine a world where that led to some kind of problems, either in the spill itself or with the subsequent cleanup. But I have no idea. I have no sources that tell me that that's actually the case. If you do, let me know. Let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to read them. I'm sure everyone watching this episode would love to know about it as well. And then otherwise, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.